Hi everyone, my name is Jim Cline and I am the founder and developer of the Excel CEO program for Microsoft Excel and Access Training, and I am really excited to be here today. I call the company Excel CEO because I really believe that you can become the Chief Excel Officer of your company if you take this training program. Now I want to give you just a brief history of the company just to give you a frame of reference of where I'm coming from this training program. Years ago, I couldn't find the people with the right Excel skills that I needed to work in my group. And I wanted to write a book where I could just give to the people on the first day of the company, and I could say, welcome to the company, the kitchen's over here, the bathroom is over there, and here's your Excel book. I want you to go through this entire Excel book, work every example, do everything exactly as I lay out in the book, and once you finish that, then you'll have the Excel skills to work in my group. Now, I honestly thought it was going to take 2 or 3 months to write this book. It's really funny because I started on the book and I got so many things going and I had so many different tasks and different problems, and I was thinking, oh, this would be really cool if I could include this. And it eventually took me 3.5 years to create the course. I started selling the course online in 2007, and we have just been expanding since then. So unlike most training courses out there, I created this one all from scratch. I started giving this Excel Tips and Tricks webinar in 2014 to expose people to some of the things that I teach in my full course, and I have had so much fun putting it all together, and I hope you'll enjoy it too. Now in this webinar, I'm going to show you a whole bunch of Excel tips and tricks that will make your life in Excel so much easier. And I do want to tell you that I have a lot of material to present here, and I only have an hour and a half to go through it, so I'm going to be going through it really quickly. What we're going to do is we're going to open an Excel file, and I'm going to take you through a couple of projects. The Excel file is located at www.excelceo.com/sales2013.xlsx. So if you input that address into your browser, you can download the file directly from excelceo.com and you can work along with me. Now my goal today is to expose you to as many Excel tips and tricks as I can in the hour and a half that I have. I actually could spend the entire time just on VLOOKUP, but we just don't have the time to do that. And that's one of the good things about doing this webinar is that we're recording it. And as it's recorded, you can go back over it time and time again if you want to review any of the concepts that I teach herein. You can also register for the complete course, which is worth 40 hours of CPE credit, continuing professional education credit. We're certified in the QAS program by NASBA. And you can read more about that if you go to our website at excelceo.com and click on the CPE tab. Now, after this webinar, if you decide to register for the full course, I'll show you how you can get it at half price. Now, the normal price of the full 40-hour course is $299, but at the end of the webinar, I'm going to give you a promotion code where you can get it for half that price. You can use this code for yourselves and your team, but I'm going to talk about that at the very end. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. Now, typically, when companies are interviewing people for their Excel skills, they ask 2 questions. The first one is, can you do a VLOOKUP? And number 2, can you do pivot tables? And they should be asking a third question, and that is, can you do nested if logic? Now we're going to be doing pivot tables. We're going to have a lot of fun doing it. Now I honestly believe that we learn best when we're doing projects. All right, now the last thing I want to talk about today is pivot tables. Now pivot tables came out with Excel 95, I believe, and I remember when they first came out, I thought I had died and gone to heaven. That was the coolest thing that I had ever seen in my life to do with spreadsheets. Before pivot tables, there was another functionality called data tables. And that was really screwy to use because you had to write a formula up in the upper left-hand corner and do some funky type of Control Alt G or whatever it was for it to calculate. But I remember when somebody first showed me pivot tables, they were just the coolest thing that I have ever seen. And that's the last thing that I'm going to show you today. Now, at the beginning, I told you that there were 2 things that companies usually ask for when they're interviewing people for their Excel skills. And those things are VLOOKUP and pivot tables. And this is the last thing that I'm going to show you today. So basically what we're going to do is I'm going to show you, we're going to create a pivot table, and I'll go through and show you how to manipulate it and slice and dice it and show you a couple of tricks there. Now, in order to create the pivot table, we need a database. So the database that we're going to use over here is on the Sales tab. So I'm going to click over here on my Sales tab. And to create a pivot table, you have to be in either one cell within the contiguous range, meaning all of the rows and columns are all together, or you can highlight the entire table. I usually just click on one cell within the table. Then you come up here to the Insert button, click on Insert, and click on Pivot Table. And what happens is Excel automatically recognizes the range of the table. It assumes that if you've clicked on only one cell that you're going to use that entire range. So in this case, it says that we want to use the range A1 to L349, which is fine. We'll click OK. And then it automatically creates a shell of a pivot table. So let's go ahead and play around with the pivot table a little bit. Over here on the right-hand side, you see the pivot table field list. The pivot table field list basically tells you or shows you all of the fields that are available in your pivot table. And these field names are exactly the same as we saw on the sales tab. So if you scroll up and down in this list, you see year, month, store number, mattress revenue, pillow revenue, all of that, all the way down to the type. You use these fields in this section down here. There's 4 different sections down here that you can use the fields in. You can drag the fields over here into a filters field, into a columns field, rows, or values. Values typically are the values that you're going to calculate, like the total sales or the count of the sales or the revenue that you're generating. The rows and columns and filters are used basically to slice and dice the data any way you want. Let me show you how that works. I'm going to click on type over here and bring it down into the rows field. As soon as I click and drag it down into the rows field, over here on the left-hand side, you see that we've got the summary of the 3 store types, the bronze, silver, and gold. What do we want to do here? Well, 99 really likes to analyze their revenue. So I'm going to click on the total revenue and bring it down here. And you see that this, as soon as I bring my total revenue down, over here, the total revenue column shows up with all of the revenue that's attributed to the bronze, to the gold, and to the silver stores. They really like to look at budget, so I'm going to bring budget down here also. So we've got the bronze, silver, and gold row types, and then we've got the revenues and budgets. Now, these numbers are not quite formatted yet. And let me tell you about formatting fields in a pivot table. You can do it like you do it in Excel. I could highlight these cells right over here and right-click and bring up the Format Cells dialog box and format them exactly the way I want to. So in a pivot table, you have some different options on how to format fields. Let me show you how to do that. I'm going to come up over here to the Sum of Total Rev column, and I'm going to double-click it. When I double-click it, the Value Field Settings dialog box appears. And this box right down here, the Number Format button, I'm going to click that. And then you see the Format Cells dialog box comes up. Now what this is going to do is it's going to format that field only. So I'm going to click on the number. I want it to have the 1000 separator. I don't want any decimal places down there. I'm going to click that down to 0. You see, that's a spinner button. All right, so we'll put that down to 0. We'll click OK there and click OK there. And now we see we've got the numbers formatted. They're a lot easier to read now. Let's do the same thing with the Sum of Budget field. I'm going to double click that, click on the number format, come up to my number option in the category, use this 1000 separator, take it down to 0, click OK once, click OK twice, and we've got that formatted now. Pivot table's starting to look pretty good now, isn't it? All right. I don't like these headings over here, Sum of Total Rev and Sum of Budget. To rename a field in a pivot table, all you have to do is type the new name in it. So instead of Sum of Total Rev, let's go ahead and say revenue. So I'm just going to type the word revenue right on top of that. Sum of Budget, I really don't like that Sum of Budget, so that's my budget, so I'm just going to type budget and enter, and oops, what happened? We got an error message. So let's read the error message. It says pivot table field name already exists. This error message basically says that you can't rename a field to exactly the same name that it is in the source data, in the sales tab. So it says in the sales table, we named that field budget, but we can't use the name budget in there. But I really want budget in there because that's what the field is. Here's a little trick to get around that. I'm going to click OK there. And instead of typing the word budget, I'm going to type budget and then a space. And once I click a space, it's not exactly the same because remember the space is a character, it just doesn't appear, especially at the end of the word. So I'm going to click enter and it works just fine. All right, what do we want to do with our pivot table now? Well, the first thing that we want to do is we want to calculate the revenue divided by the budget. Now we can do that either inside the pivot table or outside the pivot table. Outside the pivot table is going to be real easy to do. All you have to do is come over here and click on cell D4. I'm going to type equals, give me B4 divided by C4. All right, so I'm going to do that. We'll format that as a percent. We're going to give that one decimal place, and let's copy that puppy all the way down. And we see that it works just fine. It's calculating. We've got our total revenue divided by the budget is 114.8%. But if we decide to manipulate our pivot table a little bit, you're going to see that these don't copy down. Let me show you what I mean. If I come over here to the PivotTable Fields list, and let's say under type, I want to bring in the store number. So I'm going to click on store number over there, bring it down into rows, and you see that the pivot table populates all of the store numbers over here right under each of the store types, but the formula over here doesn't copy down. In fact, this other formula's got the divide by zero error message. Now, we could go ahead and double click that and copy it down. Yes, that would work, but every time you manipulate your pivot table, you would have to copy those formulas down if they're written outside the pivot table. So I'm going to take all of those out. Let me highlight all of those, click my delete button. This is another thing that you need to know about pivot tables. Right now, my field selection is outside the pivot table. To get the pivot table field list to appear, you need to be in the pivot table. So I'm going to click on my pivot table over there. When I am in a pivot table, you see this new toolbar that appears up here, or the new option over here on the Office ribbon. You see that this is called a contextual tab, the Pivot Table Tools contextual tab, and there's two tabs under that, Analyze and Design. So right now we're going to click on Analyze because I want to create a formula within a pivot table. Now watch this. This is going to be extremely cool. Before I do that, I'm going to collapse all of the pivot table fields. You see how easy that is to manipulate a pivot table. If you want to expand something, just click on the plus button. If you want to contract it or collapse it, you just click on the minus sign and it collapses. This makes it really super easy to do drill downs. All right, and we're going to do drill downs here in a minute. All right, so let's go ahead and calculate a field over here. I've clicked on the Analyze button there, and then I'm going to click on this icon over here, Fields, Items, and Sets. So I click on that, and I go down to Calculated Field. Now, I will tell you that there are a lot of advanced people that didn't know you could do calculated fields within a pivot table, so I want you to pay attention to this one. All right, so we're going to calculate a field, and we're just going to call it percent of budget, so PCT underscore BGT. And the calculation is going to be simply the revenue divided by the budget. That's one thing that's a little bit different when you're using pivot tables as opposed to working on a spreadsheet. In pivot tables, you don't type the cell references when you're doing the calculations. You type the names of the fields. So this one is going to be, let's see, we'll scroll down here. We've got total revenue and budget. So there's a couple ways that you can input this information over there. I can click on total rev and then click on my insert field button over there, type the divide by, and then I can click on budget. I can either type budget in here or actually I can double click budget and it'll automatically appear there. So I do that, I click OK, and it looks like it's giving me a sum of budget percent. That kind of looks weird. Well, I'll tell you what, let's go ahead and format that as a percent. Remember, we need to do that. So I'm going to click on the number format over there, come down to percentage. We want it to be one decimal place. So I'll use my handy dandy spinner button right over there to click on that up arrow, click OK, and click OK again. It looks like it's calculating correctly, but again, I don't like the name of that field. So I'm going to type budget percent. How's that? There it is again. We can't use that. I really like that, so I'm going to put a space in there and my enter key, collapse the column width down a little bit, and now we've got the budget percent. That is starting to look kind of cool. Let's go ahead and drill down on this a little bit. We've got bronze, gold, and silver, so I'm going to click on there. Oh, we've got our divide by zero message. Remember, store number 1021, we've got to resolve that. Here's something else that a lot of advanced people don't know. You can use some functions within a calculated field. Let's do that right now. Since I've got my Analyze tab clicked on right there, I'm going to click on Fields, Items, and Sets there, go into my calculated field, and this time I want to modify a formula. So I want to click on my percent of budget, and then over here we're going to use a simple if statement. I'm going to say if, open parentheses, the budget, and I can just type that in here, is equal to 0, then return a 0. Else, give me the calculation total revenue divided by the budget, close parentheses, and enter. And click OK. Now we see that it doesn't return the error message, and percent of budget calculation is working just fine. Last thing I want to show you about a pivot table over here is how to reorder things. If you see our store types, the bronze, gold, and silver, they're not quite in the right order. In this pivot table, we want to show the gold on top, the silver next, and then the bronze last. But there's no natural way for the sort to occur. Right now, it's sorting in ascending order. I can come up over here on my sort icon and click in descending order, but then it sorts in silver, gold, and bronze. I really want gold first, then silver, then bronze. With a pivot table, all you have to do is click and drag. So I'm just going to click over here on gold, place my cursor over the edge of one of those sides of the cell. You see it turns to the 4 arrows and the 1 arrow pointing to the middle of it. I'm going to click on that and just drag it up. You see that line that appears when I drag it up, and then it appears gold, silver, and bronze. And now my report is ready. Now, that was just a real quick introduction to pivot tables. There are a gazillion things that you can do with pivot tables. But I do want to open it for some questions now. Now, here's an interesting question. This person says that I use pivot tables all the time. Never knew you could do calculated fields. Do you have any other cool tricks that you can do with pivot tables? Now, that is an interesting question, and there is something that I want to show you. If you remember, in some of the older versions of Excel, when you had more than one field, it would appear in different columns. It wouldn't appear in the same column like this. Let me show you how that would appear. In the older versions, I'm going to click on Design over here, Report Layout, Show in Tabular Form. And when I do that, it shows each of the row items over here in separate columns. I can expand silver, I'll expand bronze right down there, and you see that they appear in each one of the columns. Now, lots of times when I was using data in this format, I wanted to write some formula, maybe a VLOOKUP or something like that, outside of the pivot table, but it was really screwy to do that because over here in the pivot table, it didn't show gold. It didn't repeat those values over there. And when I was doing some VLOOKUP or some calculated fields over here, it made it really screwy to try to manipulate or to try to write the VLOOKUP formula. But watch this. In the report layout, if you want to populate all of these, there's an option to do that. I click over here on the report layout and then come down to this item over here, repeat all item labels. You click on that and look at that. It populates everything. I thought that was one of the coolest tricks that you could possibly do. Let's play around with the pivot table just a little bit more. Just one more thing that I wanted to show you. Let's say that you wanted to analyze a store by quarter, or that you want to analyze all of this by quarter. So I'm going to bring month down here. I'll click on month, bring it down into the filters field, and release it. And this is basically a filter that filters the entire pivot table. If I wanted to look at just January, I would click on January and click OK. And now it filters the entire pivot table for just January. If I wanted to look at the first quarter, I couldn't do that in previous versions of Excel, but now look at this. I can check this box that says Select Multiple Items. I click that and checkboxes appear by each one of the months. I'm going to click the 2 and the 3, click OK, and now I can see that my pivot table is filtered for just months 1, 2, and 3. It is a little bit hard to read over here because the filter actually says multiple items, and if you just open up the pivot table, you don't know which items are chosen. You actually have to come in here and look at the items that are chosen. You can also use another functionality called slicers. Slicers are extremely cool. They're outside of what I wanted to do, or this outside of the scope of what I wanted to do today. But those are just a couple of tricks that I wanted to show you. We've got time for one more question. People are asking about the CPE credits in the full course. Do they have to complete all the 40 hours in the Excel course to get the CPE credits? The answer to that is no. If you register for my full 40-hour course, you can complete one chapter at a time. So chapter 1 is worth 3 CPE credits. The chapter 2 is worth 2 credits. Chapter 3 is 1.5, and it goes on from there. So however many CPE credits you need for your requirements, all you have to do is just complete up to that many CPE credits, and then you can wait until the next year to complete the rest. All right, now I went through a lot of stuff here. Things like this, what I showed you today, takes a lot of time to absorb. And if you weren't able to follow along with everything today, don't worry about it. I'm recording this session so you can go back over it whenever you want, and you can pause it, you can stop it, you can download the the file, the Sales 2013 file, and go as slow as you want or as fast as you want. You can also take the complete course, and I would encourage you to do that because there are a lot of things in the complete course. The complete course starts at a beginning level. Remember that. So if you're a beginning Excel student and you're just completely overwhelmed by this, don't worry. I start off by saying this is Excel. Excel is an electronic spreadsheet. It has rows and columns, and this is a cell, and so forth. And it starts off at a very beginning level. For you advanced and intermediate students, it also shows you a lot of tips and tricks that the beginning people know, but sometimes you don't know. And it is so much fun. I get emails all the time from people saying, "This, Jim, I cannot believe what I've learned in chapter 1. This is just too cool." So the entire course is worth 40 hours. The course is broken up into 3 different sections, or actually 4 different sections. You've got beginning Excel, which is chapters 1 through 5, intermediate Excel, which is chapters 6 through 10. Intermediate focuses on writing formulas. Chapters 11 through 17 are advanced Excel, and then chapter 18 is the comprehensive project, and this is the Excel Master. Now, from chapters 1 through 17, I teach you all kinds of stuff. I show you step by step exactly how to do everything. But in chapter 18, I've assumed that you've learned it all. And I'm going to give you a project, and this project is a budgeting project from Satan's Place. It is not a fun project. In fact, it is a really hard project. It'll probably take you several hours to complete this project. But if you can complete that project, you've got the Excel CEO stamp of approval that you are an Excel master. And once you complete that project, your name appears in the graduate verification link on the homepage of our website. And that way you can show that to prospective employers. You can show it to your current boss. You can show it to clients. That is proof that you are an Excel master. It has been a pleasure to give this webinar to you today. I have had a lot of fun. Hope you have had a lot of fun in doing this, and I hope to see you very soon as an Excel CEO student. Thank you so much.